and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to. Lots to talk about. The Hair Summit, tariffs. Let's start off with the tariffs. Yes, Trump signed the tariffs. And I got to start off by saying, look, first thing he's done in the White House that I agree with. I know. We've been hearing the sky is going to fall. But I think this was actually a smart move. 25% tariffs on steel, 10 on aluminum. And there is an exemption in there for Mexico and Canada. And he's being quite honest. Look, you can get away from these tariffs if we negotiate something in NAFTA. We have an agreement that benefits both of us about time. The tariffs will take place in 15 days. And it has, other countries all upset. Now, understand, we are the most open country in the world. Understand that. More people get to bring their stuff and dump their stuff here in the U.S. than any country in the world. And, I still remember the crazy little guy with the ears. What was his name? Ross Perot. Saying, all of these trade deals, go back to them and say, you know what? Let's switch it around. And none of them would take it. And he was right. He was going back into the 90s. He was absolutely right. I know that this could be one of those things that people are going, no, well, Donald Trump's done it. It's got to be bad. Am I thrilled with the way this was rolled out? Not so much. But I got to be honest, at some point, you have to make a stand, especially on the steel front. I mean, because, again, a blind squirrel finds a nut. I think Trump's right. It's in our national security. It is vital to our national security. To me, it's that simple. And I know the Republican Party, they're all up in arms. And again, not a friend of working people. I know they love to say how much they love workers and they love the middle class. It's these trade deals that have just pummeled the middle class. Now, we saw a letter from 107 members of the Republican Party to Trump voicing their opposition. Well, you know what? 131 didn't sign on. And in the announcement that these tariffs were coming, U.S. Steel announced it's going to reopen a plant in Illinois, some 500 workers. Century Aluminum says they're going to reopen a plant in Kentucky, some 300 new employees. That's a good thing. Now, I know, but Rick, we're going to lose all these other jobs. There's going to be thousands of people lose their jobs. The sky's going to fall. No. Not seeing it. Not seeing it, at least not this. Because here's the problem. And we have a real problem. And I've seen nobody really talk about this. The fact of the matter is that since 2000, we've seen employment in the steel industry cut by a third. At least 10 blast furnaces in this country have closed since 2000. We are the leading steel importer. Everybody brings and dumps their steel here. It's like we're the economy of last resort. We're the place where everyone goes, hey, we can do a whole bunch of stuff and we dump it over there. And they're stupid. They'll take it. Fact of the matter is there is one company left in this country that makes essential electric steel. One. There is one company that makes the kind of steel that you need to make a Virginia-class submarine. And we can go down the list of all of the things that we can't even make here anymore because of our insane trade policies. And for all those people who say, "Oh, we need military, and we need to be, puff out our chest, and we're number one, and we'll bomb you back into oblivion." Don't you think the bombs and all that stuff should be made here, and all of the components and all the smart chips and the magnets and all that stuff? Well, sadly, it's not. And that's my problem. Look, do I want tariffs on tennis shoes and T-shirts and all that other stuff? No, we can, as much as I hate the idea that we have open borders for all of those things to be dumped here, we're already far down the river on that. But something as vital as steel, something as important as manufacturing, I'm struggling with it because the reality is just since 2001, from the period 2001 to 2015, we lost 3.4 million jobs. 3.4 million jobs were lost because of our trade policies with China. We're talking massive trade deficits. And China is the one. The reality is we've been running, 350,000, $350 billion trade deficits. 2.6 million people lost their jobs in manufacturing alone. And you go, where are all those good jobs? Where are all those jobs that saved communities? Gone. And you go, well, those were those dirty old industry jobs. Well, those computer jobs, parts for electric components, those industries, well, we saw 1.2 million of those jobs gone. And you start looking at this stuff and you go, not good for the economy. In fact, they point out that, workers without a college degree saw their wages go down by $180 billion a year from 2001 to 2011. $180 billion a year. So where'd it go? We do have the world's largest billionaire class. We have the largest billionaire class in the history of civilization. And at some point, you have to go, there's a problem here. Now, even Elon Musk got involved in this. He tweeted out and asked the question, do you think the U.S. and China should have equal and fair rules for cars? Because for Elon, cars are his thing, Tesla. Meaning same import duties, ownership constraints, and other factors. Now, understand, in China, you can't own a majority of any company. They will not allow you to have it. But us, we say, no, come on in, buy it up. Buy it up, yeah. Understand, we have this massive trade deficit. We give them dollars for cheap stuff. And they go, well, what are we going to do with all these dollars? Well, we're not buying any of your stuff because we're making our own. So we're just going to buy you. And it's what they've been doing for the last 20 years. You go back to 1985. We had no trade deficit with China. Just in that little over 30-year period, we've gone from nothing to $350 billion. That is a huge, huge deficit. And as Musk points out, if a U.S. car manufacturer wants to import a car into China, there's 25% import duty. Yet, if a Chinese car comes to the U.S., 2.5%. So what message does that send? I mean, you're talking about 10 times the tariff. And I know people are thinking, well, we're anti-tariff. Tariffs are bad. Evidently not. Because China's got them on us, and we're the ones paying it. And it's okay because the U.S. car manufacturers are like, hey, you know what? Here's a perfect scenario for us to up and move. It was back in the 90s. I had a friend who worked for GM who said, look, right now, as we speak, in the middle 90s, he said GM's building a gigantic production facility. They're back in the mid 90s, they were spending $2 billion to build a facility. And he said even back then, what's going to happen is they're going to move all the jobs over there. They're going to ship them back here. Now, the incentive is go over there, build a big plant, say, hey, it's for domestic consumption. And then you produce a whole bunch of them and go, well, it's only a 2.5% tariff back to the U.S. Huge savings. Ship them back. And this is the kind of stuff that's been going on for far too long. And look, again, not a huge Trump fan. I am not. But somebody has to tackle this trade issue. Somebody has to say enough. And if it means he gets a little bit of a win, so much for it. Because I'll be honest, at some point we've got to stop allowing ourselves to have our lunch eaten. At some point we've got to step up and say, enough already. We're not putting up with it. Where I grew up, I still remember all of the factories that used to be there. I still remember the Ford and the Chevy plant at capacity. And then all of the feeder plants that fed into those, all of those good paying jobs that fed into those plants, all the truck driver jobs, all of the engineer jobs, all the management jobs, all of those people who were making really good money. In fact, we're probably making about the same wages that we're making today. Without all of the economic gimmickry, with all of the just inflation and all that stuff, they're probably making dollar for dollar almost the same thing. I tell the story all the time. Back in the early 90s, late 80s, I was working on a shipping dock, making $14 an hour. Benefits when I got enough hours, healthcare, pension. Today, back then, top rate was like 18 in high change, like 1870, 1880. Today, same job, exact same job. Same company, everything. $14 an hour to start. $18 top wage. No health care, no benefit for casuals. Nothing. No gimmickry, no magic solutions or potions. None of that. Dollar for dollar. And I go back to, in my view, it's all about the trade policies. So if this starts us on that path that moves us back in a direction where we're talking about sane trade policies and talking about trading again, I'm all in favor of it. But this idea of having big U.S. corporations move somewhere else and bring their things back here for us to buy, not buying. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So much to get to. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Scott Dworkin's going to be here. Going to have some of his thoughts on the musical staff at the White House, the big announcement today of the Hair Summit. Oh, so much to get to. Quick break, right back.
90% of the wealth, 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2007. That was the day 7,000 workers at Northrop Grumman, a shipyard company in Pascagoula, Mississippi, went out on strike. Grumman is one of the largest defense contractors in the world. The workers were members of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 733, and the Pascagoula Metal Trades Council. They were still reeling from the ravages of Hurricane Katrina just 2 years earlier. The hurricane had devastated the Mississippi Gulf Coast and sent prices for housing skyrocketing. But while workers suffered, Katrina brought $3 billion in federal contracts to Northrop Grumman to repair hurricane damage. Despite this, Grumman proposed a 4-year contract for the workers with no raises and increased health care costs. For many workers, this did not sit well. They knew the company had received massive government contracts, but still was not willing to treat workers fairly at the bargaining table. The union members rejected the offer and voted to strike. The company came back with a proposal offering small raises, which did not keep pace with the cost of living. The strike was called. For 4 weeks, workers marched and manned the picket lines. During the strike, the company cut off the workers' health care coverage. The company then offered slightly higher wages and reduced the increases to health care coverage. Although the proposal was not enough to keep up with the soaring local cost of living, union members voted to end the strike and accept the offer. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Rebuilding America. The Rick Smith Show.
So Paul Manafort entered a not guilty plea on bank and tax fraud, and a Virginia judge has put his trial date for July 10th. Another one. Again, they're putting the screws in, tightening it down. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. And here to share some of his thoughts on, the Hair Summit, musical staffers, and all that. Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Scott, thanks for taking time for us. Are you there, Scott?
Can you hear me now?
We seem to have a slight video problem. We'll get Scott on the line here in a minute. At the end of this, one of the things that I've been trying to get to is you look at the. I just love technology. It's one of those things that every time you think that this software is going to work, it really puts it to you. It's just one of those things that gets me. But here again, going back to this, it looks like Manafort is pleaded not guilty in a Virginia court, and like I said, July 10th is going to be the date of the trial. A total of 32 new charges against Manafort and his associate Rick Gates. It's one of those things that makes you go, at some point, do we lock him up or does he flip? That's going to be the big question. Let's take a quick break. We're going to get Scott back on here any minute. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1924. That was the day that tragedy struck at the Utah Fuel Company mine in Castlegate, Utah. The mine stood about 90 miles southeast of Salt Lake City. Coal mining began at Castlegate in 1888. On the fateful day of the explosion, at 8 in the morning, 2 violent blasts ripped through the number 2 mine. 20 minutes later, a third explosion went off. According to an investigation by the Bureau of Mines, the explosions inside the mine were extremely violent and reached all parts of the mine. 171 miners were killed instantly. Those who died reflected the diversity of those who worked in the mines. There were 49 Greeks, 22 Italians, 8 Japanese, 7 English, 6 Australian, 2 Scotch, 1 Belgian, and 76 Americans, including 2 African Americans. They left behind a combined total of 241 children and 25 pregnant wives. Rescue efforts were impeded by the poisonous gases and fire raging in the mine. Rescuers donned helmets to attempt to reach those below. One rescue leader, George Wilson, died from the carbon monoxide when his nosepiece separated from his helmet. It's believed the explosion occurred when one of the bosses attempted to relight the flame on his headlamp. At the time, he was investigating a pocket of built-up gas in the mine. The flame ignited the gas and built up coal dust. The previous shift had kicked up the dust, and it had not been adequately watered down. This contributed to the explosions. It took 9 days to recover all of the bodies of those who died. The families of those killed were provided about $64 a month by the company and the state of Utah for several years after the tragedy. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So like I said, Paul Manafort pled guilty. July 10th going to be pled not guilty. July 10th, the scheduled trial in Virginia. Here to talk a little bit about that. Also, the Hair Summit, the musical chairs in the White House. Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Scott, thanks for taking time for us. How is it that we lost Scott again?
How about now? Does that work?
There we go. Now I think you got to love technology.
I blame my podcast guys who have been messing around with my audio, so I'm guessing it's on my end tonight, so I'm sorry for the trouble.
All right, well, it is what it is. So what do you think? The not guilty plea, what do you think?
I think that when you're facing this many charges and you're his age, there's math. So, I mean, is he going to spend the rest of his life in prison? Or is he going to strike a deal and try to maybe even, get out eventually? So it's not a question of, I don't think, whether or not he'll go to prison. It's whether or not he'll go for the rest of his life or not.
Or, maybe he's sitting on a park bench and someone, like a Russian operative comes by and dusts him.
Jesus. Yeah, I hope that happens to no one, including him. But it's obviously, one of the intentions, if that was Russia in Britain, that with the sarin like gas attack, that's intentional, and that's them showing that they can attack from anywhere, and they're not afraid to do it on British soil, and they're not afraid to do it on American soil either. So it's quite terrifying. That is a possibility. I think he's actually in protective custody, I would assume, at least of some sort, personal security, or otherwise, just because of the threat that he poses to the nation, and also the threat that poses against him.
Yeah, I mean, it's really scary times when you look at the real world consequences of what really can happen and what is happening. And I look at this whole investigation and I wake up some days and I go, this just doesn't seem real that, we would be in this situation in this country. I mean, it's just mind blowing some days.
Well, I started looking at things, I think it was like September of 2016, when I started really delving into things. There's a lot of other people who were doing the same. Your good friends Sarah Kendzior, Seth Abramson, Ann Kahn, and some other folks, Grant Stern. We're looking heavy into this, and it really was. I think it was determination from everybody from the outside, because I couldn't believe half the stuff I was reading. When we started uncovering the different links, and now, in our newest dossier, which comes out in the next 2 weeks, it lists over 275 links to Russia, between Trump and Russia, and it also lists over $1 billion in transactions between Russians and Trump. And that's kind of like where we've come from, and it really is terrifying, because these are not our friends we're talking about, and that's the problem. And I think people are going to start to realize the fact when they're partnered with North Korea and everybody who's an adversary, they're not on our side.
Yeah. No, I mean, I look at it, and it goes back to the fall of the Soviet Union, and all of those ties. And Dana Rohrabacher's name was brought up today, and there's talk about that he's got some ties to the Russians, and people are starting to look at him as they should. And you go back to that that era right after the fall of the the Soviet Union, and all of those contacts and all of those. It just seems all of those Reaganites seem to have, I don't know, found the money, found the trough, if you will.
That or being blackmailed. Because remember how easy, and I think that's the thing, it doesn't need to be that tricky in regards to blackmail.
Right.
It could be as easy as a tape of them with a woman. It could be, or a man. It could be a tape of somebody promising something. And it doesn't have to be that bad. But I think a lot of these people think what they're doing is right. And we've been over that before. But people like Rohrabacher and Nunes, who I believe will be in prison this time next year, I don't. It's a little too deep for what we would hope. I mean, like it's beyond the level of what we would expect. Rohrabacher has been Putin's congressman probably for the last 5-6 years now, and they've been tighter than he was closer to Putin than he was to Obama, and that's pathetic when it comes down to a member of Congress. I mean, I don't care how your divisions are. If you're going to choose Putin, oh wait, I forgot about Donald Trump, who also has an affinity for Putin. Anyway, so I think those two members of Congress are definitely they're in deep trouble. I mean, Nunes not only directed staff to leak documents, he leaked documents himself. A lot of those seem to have been confidential documents and classified information. So we'll see where that goes. But at the minimum, a lot of these guys, I think they'll eventually have the screws turned to them because there's not much wiggle room as to whether or not they've committed crime.
So what are you thinking of what's going on with the musical staff? I mean, you see Hope Hicks leaving this week, saying that her emails were hacked. You've got this this Nunberg nitwit running around, screaming that he's not gonna honor the subpoena. Then he is. Just a lot of chaos and a lot of stuff going on. What were your thoughts? Distraction, and I can see a constant distraction because they've done this before. I've reported legitimately 4 times that Betsy DeVos was resigning, and those were credible from the White House, and also through credible sources, like the New Yorker and New York Times, where they covered it, and the intention of that was to distract. She never had any intention to resign. She had no intention to leave, and they've done this with Tillerson, Mattis, everybody. I don't know someone they haven't done, and it's a game until the end. Even when the end, if you can tell me one person from the White House and whether or not they were fired or they resigned, clearly, I don't think the one exists. You can think about Spicer, Scaramucci. I mean, there's one side to each of them, but they muddy the waters intentionally to make it confusing so that you're talking about it more. But this is, it's part intentional and part chaos, and Trump's eyes off of this. I just don't, I don't know who he goes to on the bench because, I think the only people who will be left are on his side are Russians. So he's going to start having to import people here shortly, I think. Yeah, I mean, I look at this, and again, you brought up billionaire Betsy, and our horrible Secretary of Education, and her brother came up again in the news, and it's one of these things. And what's frustrating to me is this is all stuff that we've already known. I mean, this meeting that Eric Prince had in Seychelles with this Russian, whatever you want to call him, we knew about this, and we believed it was about creating a back channel. We knew this a long time ago, and yet here it is again. Now it's news.
Betsy's given. There's a couple nuggets of information your listeners should have here on Betsy. One is she has long-standing Russian ties that go into her pocketbook, and I think one of the things to note is her company has 4 main headquarters in Russia. They also have they were raided by the FSB, so the Russian security services, raided her offices in Russia for tax fraud in mid-2016. So that was an issue she had to deal with. And she's given over $2.5 million to Russian organizations from her nonprofit. And it's a couple of things on top of the fact that Eric's her brother, and she's probably, she's obviously done worse things with her money. But there's again, another path to Blackwater and, all this madness. The guy who's basically a terrorist for hire at this point. I mean, that's what it seems. And I think it's about time that Prince got in trouble, but, things like this, you're going to start to see everything loop back around. Everything is going to loop back around to the same people. Started with Trump, it's going to end with Trump. One of the first people that we found out about was Michael Cohen. It's going to end with Michael Cohen. I mean, this is huge. You're going to start hearing too many characters. You're going to start hearing, about indictments, I would assume, for different cases, mixed between what Mueller has and then on the state level. I'm assuming that the DOJ will eventually get involved on the side, not just on the FBI side for the Mueller investigation, but get involved further, like they've indicted Russians already for hacking and other things. But this is going to be, this Watergate's not even got. Like, Watergate holds no water on this. I mean, that's how bad this Russia scandal is. I mean, we're still talking about, close to 100 indictments, but hundreds of people being implicated at this point. I mean, it's much larger than we ever thought it was. It involves more countries than we thought it was, but it was led by Russia. It was run by Russia, and Putin authorized it. And we need to keep that in mind, because the main goal here is to hurt America and us. It's not to help us. They have no interest in helping us. So we need to, stop thinking about it like that way. And I think that when we see that they're trying to hurt our military, in any of these attacks on ally soil, that's a line where they're not, other countries aren't going to let them cross, and they're going to start calling Trump out for his inaction on Russia.
It's certainly going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But, I look at this and, again, you come back to, and I've had so many conversations with people who they defend Trump. Well, no, he loves America. He waves the flag. He does all. He couldn't possibly do this. Do you think there's that moment where even they wake up to the reality of how bad this is, that eventually the evidence is just so overwhelming and compelling that even the most ardent Trump supporters' eyes open up and go, wow, this was horrible?
I think that was the fascinating thing about Nunberg coming out, is when he came out, he was so shocked to see people look at him and sincerely say, you're going to go to jail if you don't show up. And him kind of looking like flabbergasted, like, you can't, that wasn't planned, that's for sure. And it's just like, it's very clear that a lot of them were told by other people that they were not in trouble. And if they got in trouble, they'd get out of it. And Trump's done that for decades. And a lot of friends have gone to prison with those promises. So this is the same kind of circumstance where once you're out of that Trump circle, you're either eaten alive, you're making a deal with Mueller, or you're hiding until you get subpoenaed, hoping that you don't. And right now, I can tell you this, Mueller's not going to waste his time. He's not going to subpoena someone unless he knows they have something, for the most part, at this part.
Right.
I would assume that he knows all, and he's trying to see if you're going to lie. He's trying to see how expansive it is. He's trying to see what details you're leaving out. Because, lies by omission is, and also acting like they're stupid, are going to be their two defenses. So they're going to act like we forgot or we're incompetent. And neither of those are going to fly with Mueller, because he's going to have everything that's in stone. They're going to think they were smarter. A good example of that is George Papadopoulos. As simple as a thing of him deleting his Facebook page and starting a new one. When he first sat down with them, they knew that. They knew that information. And that was part of the reason why he got. I guess it was because he did it with a sinister motive. They were able to prove something as simple as that, like that he deleted his Facebook page intentionally with the to hide information and evidence that would have struck justice. I mean, just very simply like that, and of the hundreds of other things that he did as well. So, I mean, these people are not innocent, but I think they've been promised a lot of things. And again, in Trump world, unless you're a Trump or Trump himself, you're not going to be saved at the end of the day. He could care less about you.
Yeah, there's no savior there. But do you think that's part of the reason why Hope Hicks came out and said that her emails were hacked? Because I'm looking at this and all the people who were the emails were hacked and all of this, and I'm going, the only person who seemed to not get hacked was Hillary with her server in her basement.
It's interesting how, and you know what? I'm glad that Trump doesn't have the emails from our former Secretary of State, because I don't think that he should have the clearance to read them. It is funny, though, that the one person who successfully hid everything, or not hid, but was able to secure everything, was Hillary. And, I think that's telling. She's obviously smarter than all of them. But I will say, it's, these people are masters of deception. Having multiple planes take off from the same airport that they all chartered, riding with aliases under different passports from different countries, having holdings in banks in the Bahamas and across the world that have shell corporations that are connected to other shell corporations that they just use to wire money. I mean, and here's the bottom line, though. These people are evil. Like, this is not, when you're laundering money, you're taking dirty money and you're making it clean. So what is that money used for? How did you get it in the first place? That's going to be linked to drugs, sex trafficking, murder, and things like that. And so when you come out with, okay, yeah, he laundered money, well, what kind of money, how much of that money came from a terrorist organization and went back to it? How much money went to an adversarial country and came back to him? I mean, and that's what we're really going to be looking at is what do they actually do and who have they hurt? Because even his, just as an example, Manafort's daughters, via text messages between himself that were also hacked, they say that it's blood money. They assume that their dad killed people and ordered the killing of people as well.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. These are who these people are. From what I've seen, I have not, I haven't seen a criminal force like that, but that's the kind of people they are.
And this week you also saw that the hotel in Panama that Donald Trump said was Ivanka's baby. All of the signs of money laundering there. Buying mass amounts of properties, buying it with cash, using shell corporations, all of this stuff. And it got me to questioning, how much is she involved in this? Because you look at all the stuff with Jared, and to me, the interesting thing is going to be to watch at the end, who does Trump side with? Or who does Ivanka side with? Or how does this play out? Does Ivanka go with daddy or baby daddy? To me, that's kind of the intrigue.
It seems like they both are safe as of this moment. And even then, I'm sure they have promise of near immediate or attempts of pardon. I just don't see Kushner being able to stay in the White House much longer, especially for the fact that Trump gets mocked over him.
Right.
And there's actually, there's very good reason besides the fact that he's his son-in-law, besides the fact that he took all these loans out, besides the fact that he tried to, he's been selling his White House role to the highest bidder, besides the fact that he met with the Russian bank that's directly linked to Putin and ran by Putin, besides the fact that he tried to set up a back channel via the Russian embassy in D.C. so that he could talk to the Kremlin privately. This ridiculous. That's what a Russian spy would be in my mind. I've always thought of Jared to be, even an unwitting sort of Russian spy. Because again, it doesn't need to be that confusing. His whole goal is to have money, right? He needs more money, and who's going to give it to him? How are they going to give it to him, and why are they going to give it to him? If he does something in the White House, like make sure that they don't impose sanctions. As long as that's good, then maybe his loans are good. Maybe he's good on money in every aspect. But something like Panama is so dirty. I mean, that he had a casino there, and I believe that he still has active casinos across the world right now that he has ownership in, especially in China and India. So I think he's got some issues. I'm not sure if he still owns the one in Panama or not. I'm not sure if it's still active either. But you shouldn't have a president that owns casinos. Or anything. Fact of the matter, because they're going to have that. You don't want that back of the head. You never want them to have it in the back of their head of, I should never have to ask, did he take that military action to protect one of his hotels or his properties or his friends, or did he do it for America? And you have to ask that with every single move that he makes, and you should never have to ask that. It should be innate. It should be very known to them that they are patriots or whatever. But yeah, so with his Panama hotel, they did strip off his name from the hotel. They did win that eventually, but there was like a thug encounter. There was a couple days of pushing and shoving between security forces, and you got to wonder, what was Trump hiding? Besides trying to fight for the property, what was he actually hiding access from? Probably financial.
No, and those are huge questions, and I still ask, where are the tax returns? I mean, and this is all stuff, Scott, that again should have been vetted out, or maybe it was, and people weren't paying attention. This should have been vetted out during the campaign, because all of this stuff was known. And I was talking to people all along during the campaign season who were saying this stuff. It just wasn't being picked up.
Yeah. I mean, and there was it's the same thing he does now. It's distract, and bounce off with a new distraction, and just comes up with something new. And you hope that people get tired of it. I think instead people just get tired, and they look at it and they're like, this is the same old stuff. And of course, the fear there is normalizing it, and we don't want to. None of this is normal.
Yeah.
Like, none of it. If I would have pushed. I will very clearly. I will say that if Obama had done a tenth of the stuff, maybe even less, I'd be pushing for him to resign. I mean, I don't, and I don't know if it's a double standard. I don't know if we're a party that actually has any morals or higher ground whatsoever. But I would never, if it was Hillary, if it was Bill, if it was Obama, I would never think that. I would never even want to have a lingering outcome of a porn star payout for pre-election, like all of that mess. Like these are going to be things that are publicly exposed, and it hurts America. Like all of these little scandals hurt America, and it's just going to, I would assume, embolden Trump as long as he's able to stay in office.
No, I agree with you, but here's the thing. I mean, most people that I know who are Trump supporters don't care. They already knew he was the guy who would go up and grab her by the you-know-what. This is just another feather.
Well, he shouldn't. That's fine for them to not care and say this is the guy that they elected, and then we can say, well, I guess he's exactly what we expected. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to push back even harder against every single thing that he does, for the most part, because everything is sinister. So even the whole tariffs that he's doing, and I know we have different stances a bit on that, but I will say this, it's crappy how it's rolled out, and I think he's doing it intentionally to cause issues so that he can then negotiate with other countries, and he'll exempt probably most of the EU, and he already exempted Canada and Mexico, but I worry because it's like, well, how much money does he still have invested in stuff that surrounds steel and aluminum? And like that's another thing.
There's a lot of questions, yeah.
Yeah, and so I have to question everything he does because because I've found something sinister involved with everything he does.
No, and look, there's nothing he does without a motive. You're absolutely right. I do agree. I do agree on that. Let me ask you last bit of questioning because I wanted to get your thoughts on the hair summit. The big news today, evidently, Un and Trump are going to they're going to meet. It's historic. What do you think?
What a joke! What a joke! I mean, I get how it can be a historic distraction. You know, I think it's ridiculous. I don't think that it's just something that you jump into. But good luck on the diplomacy front. I just don't think that he'll be able to meet Kim Jong-un by May because I don't think he'll be president by then. So this may be just hype, and it may not happen. But I'm excited for potential peace. I just don't think that those two guys are not going to be the guys to make it happen.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I hope they put it on pay-per-view because it's going to be quite an interesting. It would be an interesting conversation to watch. Two crazy people, kind of talking to each other.
It would. I wouldn't pay to see it, but I definitely would watch it on demand, maybe. But the free on demand. But I would say that it is interesting that foreign policy and peace throughout the world could be dependent on three people: Kim Jong-un, Donald Trump, and their apparent middleman, Dennis Rodman. So I will say what's shocking is out of the three, I trust Rodman the most.
That's saying something. There you go, Scott. I appreciate the time, man. Always great talking with you. Look forward to having you back again real soon.
Thanks again. Talk to you soon, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
Measures we explore, marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out, "Where's our government?" Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Profit billions off our back, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money, we work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations. It's next. One day longer. One day longer. The people's
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So McDonald's went all out today. It's no longer a big giant M. It's now a W. And the Twitters, well, the Twitters were quite pleased. Because you knew what was coming. You knew wage theft was going to be put with that. You knew income inequality. You knew all of the women's issues that corporate America has really, slammed women over the years with. You knew that was going to come out, and rightfully so. Also, you had Ronna McDaniel. She's the RNC's chair, who in an op-ed wrote that the Republicans, we believe that all issues are women's issues. We fight for the policies to make it easier for women to live, work, and raise families. And if that weren't true, because this is the party that stands with Trump. It's now a W. And the Twitters, well, the Twitters were quite pleased. Because you knew what was coming. You knew wage theft was going to be put with that. You knew income inequality. You knew all of the women's issues that corporate America has really, slammed women over the years with. You knew that was going to come out, and rightfully so. Also, you had Ronna McDaniel. She's the RNC's chair, who in an op-ed wrote that the Republicans, we believe that all issues are women's issues, which is why we fight for the policies to make it easier for women to live, work, and raise families. And if that weren't true, because this is the party that stands with Trump. Stood with Roy Moore. These are the abstinence-only people. These are the people who held a panel on contraception and did not have a single woman on it. Yeah, I get it. Anyway, here to talk about this, the International Women's Day, I've asked Kristen Rowe Finkenbinder to come talk with us. She's the executive director and co-founder of Moms Rising. Kristen, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you taking some time. You know, I look at this and, you know, International Women's Day, a day to spend time focused completely on women's issues. What should we be focusing on?
Well, we should be focusing on the power of women, and we should be celebrating our power. We're just over 50% of the people in our country, and we are rising up, and we're rising up in big ways. Just yesterday, there was a big win in Washington State where they passed the Equal Pay Opportunity Act. I did a happy dance, and other states are moving forward with progressive policy as well. But one thing is important. Our voices, our power is needed because it's 2018 and we still don't have equal pay for equal work, and women of color and moms are experiencing the most increased wage hits.
No, I absolutely agree with you. In fact, you know, one of the big knocks that I have against the Obama administration is they pursued the Lilly Ledbetter Act instead of an improvement to our labor law to make sure that women don't get cheated in the first place.
Well, actually, I'm like, oh, well, actually, lady, I was there. What was going on was so interesting. We were also pursuing a Paycheck Fairness Act at the same time as the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Restoration Act. I love that it is such a long legislative title, and I want everybody to try to say it 5 times fast. Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Restoration Act. So it didn't move us forward. It literally restored some of the rights that had been taken from women. But at the same time, we were pushing, and the Obama administration was pushing too, for a Paycheck Fairness Act, which moved the ball forward. And I'm delighted to say that it did at one point pass the U.S. House, and at another point pass the U.S. Senate, but it never in the same congressional session passed both the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. So we came very close to passing a Paycheck Fairness Act in our history, our pretty recent history. And now we're going to come close, I think, to moving it forward in the future because we see states like Washington, I just shared with you, passing mirror images of that policy, but at the state level. So, you know, we can't ding the Obama administration on that one, but we can ding Congress. No, absolutely. It was always my view. You know, it's one thing to allow someone to go back and you've been cheated all these years and we'll fix that. How about we just make sure they don't get cheated? That's exactly. That's where my mind was. But I look at this and I look at Ms. McDaniel's statement that they're the party of women and they're going to make all women's issues, every issue is a woman's issue. And I look at all of these attacks from top to bottom, you know, the attacks on workers. I don't know if you know about the Janus versus AFSCME case, but it's going to make this a right to work country for public sector workers, of which we know majority of public sector workers are women. Yeah, I mean, the crisis that's happening with our workplace protections right now is critical. We know that people who are holding union jobs have more workplace protections. So what am I talking about when I say workplace protections? I'm talking about things like retirement benefits. I'm talking about healthcare benefits. I'm talking about access to guaranteed minimum number of paid sick days, of paid family leave. Now, folks who are in jobs that are union jobs are much more likely to have those protections. But here's the kicker. Folks who don't have the protections are majority women. So 2/3 of minimum wage workers in the United States of America are women, and those minimum wage jobs are the least likely to have those protections in their jobs. And so women, and on International Women's Day, we got to talk about this, are really experiencing increased impacts of losing union jobs. No, and that's something that, you know, anyone losing a union job, it's a tragedy in my view, because they're good paying jobs with good benefits and health care and retirement security and job security and all of those things, a voice on the job, all of that. And to see those go away and the attacks that are coming, especially from the Republicans, it's one of those things that's just infuriating. When I see someone like Ms. McDaniel saying that, you know, hey, all issues are women's issues. You're right. I would guess all issues that you stand against. I like the way you frame that. Speaking of standing against, since it's International Women's Day, I want to frame what is going on with women because it is super interesting to hear what's going on so that we can address it. And the wage gap is a really good way to figure out what's going on. So women on the whole, on average, are making 80 cents to a man's dollar. We have then moms making 70 cents to a man's dollar. Black women are making 63 cents to a man's dollar, and Latina women are making only 54 cents to a man's dollar. So moving through those policies that we were just talking about is important, as is making sure that we have representation in our workplaces so that we can have paycheck transparency, so that we can advocate for each other based on our work qualifications and our work classification, not based on people's biases. And so again, if we're talking about unions, what's going on, what the shifts that are happening, we know that in union jobs, you're more likely to have fair pay because there's more job classification pay setting than sort of random pay setting. So what's your thought on that on International Women's Day?
No, I'm all in favor of it. Look, every job I've ever had, there has been a contract and it said, this is what you'll earn. These are your benefits. It was all laid out in black and white. Didn't matter if you were a man or a woman, you were black, white, green, purple. It was all laid out. It didn't matter who was doing the job. You were paid that wage. And we didn't have those problems. The problem that, as you point out, it's the lack of transparency. And I often tell the story about my wife who she was a billing manager years and years ago. And if anyone in the under her command asked someone else what they made, they were to fire both of them. Or somebody got fired and you go, how is that legal? And, at the time, who's going to fight it? How are you going to fight that?
Well, it is legal. A lot of people think it's illegal because it is illegal if you can prove that they only asked the question to women. But how the heck do you prove that? Because you're not in the room when all of those conversations are happening, which is why we're seeing these laws move forward. But I want to get to the part that is the positive part about having women in the labor force too, because all the time people are like, Kristen, you're complaining all the time. What's going on? So the positive parts, and actually I wrote about this on CNN today in an inclusion rider piece about how having an inclusion rider for the entire country would be a good thing. And that comes out of the Academy Awards or the Oscar speech that just happened in Hollywood, where people are talking about making inclusion riders so that people make fair pay in the movies, right? Well, we need one of those not only on the red carpet, but in the whole country. And it's not just because it would make pay fair, but also, this is the good news part, studies show that when you have more women in leadership, more diversity in workplaces, there are better products, there's better outcomes, and more profits. So this is a win-win no matter what gender you are, to include women and pay women fairly. And it's a win-win if you want a healthy economy, because women make 80% of the consumer purchasing decisions in our economy that is based on consumer spending. So
yeah, I know my wife does.
I like the positive part out there too.
No, I hope I hope that is. I mean, look, I've been saying for years, we men have kind of screwed things up. I've always enjoyed working for women. I prefer going to women doctors because they listen. My only fear is that when women get to the power positions, they're going to become just like men.
Yeah. Well, first we have to get there. I was looking actually up yesterday, and only 4% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women, despite the fact that, study after study shows that there's more corporate profits with women in leadership. So there's no reason that should be happening. It doesn't add up. Women are getting more college degrees, but, we haven't gotten there yet. So one of the things I think about sometimes is have this false idea of what parity looks like. Parity would be 50% representation of women. But, this is interesting. In cartoon movies, in the background characters, only 30% are female. And when you look at our Congress, only 20% are female. When you look at Fortune 500 companies, 4% are female. When you look at media executives, about 20% are female. So somehow in our cultural consciousness, we have decided that parity is 20 or 30%. So we're still, 20 or 30% short. We've all got to look around and, think about how our brain is calculating parity. It's amazing. Then the next question is, well, do women want to take over and rule the entire world at 101%? No, maybe, but no.
Oh no, every woman I know, every woman I know, they want to take over. I've heard this is our time. We're taking over. You guys have screwed everything up. And I'm going, go ahead. You want to fix it? Go ahead. I'm all in favor of it.
Well, I won't comment on that specifically, except to share that there was a Harvard study recently that found that the more women in elected leadership, regardless of political party, the more laws that passed that helped the most people and boosted the economy the most. So, I'm just going to leave that right there.
Yeah. Let me ask you the other side of this, because this year, 2018, big election year, lots of women across the country running In fact, I think my wife now has a new favorite gubernatorial candidate from Wisconsin, this Kelda Roys. I don't know if you've seen her commercial, but she's actually breastfeeding during her political commercial, which is a new first, and I'm sure my wife jumping for joy for that.
Yeah, there's a ton of great candidates coming forward. Over 500 new female candidates for high-powered offices. It is a great year, and I hope everybody who's listening, everybody who's watching, goes and makes sure you're registered to vote. Now, I'm saying this because I happen to know, I love data. I looked up the data about what happened in our last presidential election. Donald Trump is sitting in the Oval Office because 26% of our eligible voters voted for him, right? That means a whole heck of a lot of people who we know, you and I know, are not registered to vote or are actually registered to vote and didn't vote. So the time is now, right this minute, to check on your voter registration. Women need to actually update their voter registration often quite a lot more regularly than men because we change our names the most, right? So if we get married, we get divorced, we change our names through our lives. Every time you have to re-register to vote. So everybody needs to go check in and get registered to vote right now, today. And I'm expecting landslide victories across the country for women.
There you go. So that's the marching order. That's what we should be taking from this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. Good
Definitely.
stuff.
Also, I have a new book coming out. You mentioned the word marching. It's called Keep Marching, and it's about who, what, when, where, why, and how you can take action. It talks about all the issues, shares stories, facts, and then it has to-do lists for how you can really make a difference at the state and federal level. I'm excited you brought up marching.
We will make sure we get a link at thericksmithshow.com so people can get a hold of the fantastic book. Kristen, I appreciate you taking some time for us. I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thanks so much. Happy International Women's Day.
Good stuff. Thanks so much. Kristen Rowe, Finkbeiner. Again, you check out their website, Mom's Right.
Now here come the cuts and redundancy. Through the absolute indifference, the avarice, incompetence, your arrogance, your ignorance, your greed.
I think that just about sums up what's going on right now in the Senate. I cannot believe that they're actually talking about undoing Dodd-Frank and moving us back to the wild, wild west of the Bush years. I've been of the mindset for a very long time. I think that just about sums up what's going on right now in the Senate. I cannot believe that they're actually talking about undoing Dodd-Frank and moving us back to the wild, wild west of the Bush years. I've been of the mindset for a very long time we should be going back to undoing all of the damage Bill Clinton did back in the 90s with Graham Leach Bliley and put the wall of separation back and all of that stuff. But it seems we never learn. We never seem to learn. And what's frightening to me is, you usually think a generation, maybe two, learns. We're going to make the same dumb mistake in the same generation. Scary, scary stuff. But here to talk about the rollback of Dodd-Frank, I've asked Greg Gilzinas to come talk with us. He's a research associate for economic policy at the Center for American Progress. Greg, thanks for taking time for me.
Thanks for having me on, Rick. I appreciate it.
So am I getting this right? They're actually talking about rolling back what few minor provisions are protecting our economy by allowing the banks again unfettered access to screw us over?
I wish you had it wrong, but unfortunately, you're exactly right about that. At a time where I think we should be talking about going even further than Dodd-Frank, and don't get me wrong, Dodd-Frank made a lot of progress on this space, but with the economy booming right now and doing well, unfortunately not well for everyone, but doing well, in the aggregate, we should be talking about strengthening our financial rules so that our banks and the largest non-banks in the country can withstand another financial shock and economic downturn.
I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me. I mean, we had the Great Depression, then we put some rules in place. You had Glass-Steagall, and it was there for a very long time because there was, our grandparents telling us, don't do that again. You got the 90s, you got Phil Graham and Leach and Bliley and Bill Clinton signing off on the economic, I forget what it was called, but it basically destroyed the wall. And everyone was saying, this is going to be bad, this is going to be bad. George Bush years, massive collapse. So did we not learn the lesson from destroying the wall? And then we put up a little fence, and now we're going to tear that down.
Yep, that's exactly right. And perfectly enough, Senator Elizabeth Warren was on the floor of the Senate today and made that exact point. She went through the history of this unfortunate cycle that happened. We have good economic times. We start to roll back some of the financial protections we have in place for the financial sector. The economy crashes. Workers, families, homeowners, savers, they all bear the brunt of that. We put in some rules following that crisis. Things get better, and we go through the cycle over and over again. You'd expect that we'd learn, but unfortunately we haven't.
And I look at someone like Joe Manchin. I mean, he's one of the people who apparently is all in favor of this. West Virginia just got slammed in the last recession/depression, depending on which side of that line you fell on. It makes no sense to me that the people of West Virginia are clamoring to let the bankers go.
Yeah, I think all over the country, I can't imagine constituents in these states, whether it's West Virginia or Montana, North Dakota, Virginia, others, Delaware, Pennsylvania. I just can't imagine anywhere across this country people are clamoring to roll back the rules that we put in place, to try to limit the chances and severity of another financial crisis. I can't imagine that those offices are being flooded with calls saying, we need to let J.P. Morgan and Citigroup off the hook. I just don't think it's happening.
Is it possible that J.P. Morgan and Citibank and all these other big bankers, the corporate people, are the ones who are really putting the influence on? Because look, the Democrats that I've seen, you've got McCaskill from Missouri, you've got Manchin from West Virginia, Heitkamp from North Dakota, and Donnelly from Indiana, who are all the Democrats that I know of who have said that they're in support of this. Could it be that they're in tough reelection campaigns and the moneyed interests are saying, "Hey, you don't go our way, we're gonna bomb you"?
Yeah, I think that's spot on, and unfortunately, the list of Democrats on the bill is pretty long at 13 members of the Democratic caucus that have signed on, and then an additional 4 members that have helped advance the bill, through a vote on what we call the motion to proceed this week. And I think that's right. I think in some of these tough reelection campaigns in red states, I think the senators want to say that they are not a East Coast liberal, part of the East Coast liberal elite, and that they can work across the aisle. And so in some ways, this is bipartisanship for bipartisanship's sake, and not on the substance of the bill.
So what's the argument on why these onerous regulations are killing banking? Because last time I checked, the banking industry was doing really well.
Yeah, but over the past few years, banking profits, and I say this not just with the big banks, even small banks across the country, profits have been at or near all-time highs. Lending, which contracted significantly during the financial crisis, which is why the real economy had such a tough time, has actually rebounded significantly and is also at or near all-time highs. So the big question on this, for so many reasons, is why are we doing this? What is the problem we are trying to solve? When we could be focusing on protecting dreamers, when we could be focusing on limiting the possibilities for our kids getting gunned down in classrooms across the country, this is what the United States Senate has decided to focus on.
I mean, are there any arguments on why this is so much so needed? Because like we've just said, the banks seem to be doing well. They're not losing money. They're making profit. What's the argument and why this has to happen and why it has to happen now? Or is it just they're pursuing it because it was something Obama did? I mean, I know that's very popular with the Trump administration, that it was something that happened in the last term. That all has to go. This is part of it. What's the argument for going forward with this?
I think for Republicans in the Senate, you're right on the ball there. President Trump many months ago said that one of his big goals was to, quote, do a number on Dodd-Frank, and I think that's in part because it is kind of a key pillar of President Obama's legacy. So I think that's absolutely at the heart of why Republicans are trying to push this. And I should be clear about this: the Republican conference is united behind this bill, whereas 2/3 of Democrats do oppose the bill.
I mean, I'm just, as we're going through this, I'm just, my mind, because I got to be honest, I remember, September of 2008, and I remember it vividly. And I remember, having people on this program who were losing their homes. And I remember the home defenders who were, occupying people's homes so that they couldn't be repossessed. And, I remember all of that pain, all of that chaos, all of that because we told the banking industry, go ahead, come up with complicated, financial instruments that you don't even understand and blow up our economy. And here we are going to give them the tools to do it again.
That's right. And I'm glad that you bring this back down to people because, in D.C., when we debate kind of these esoteric financial regulatory tools, and I'm guilty of this all the time, we sometimes lose sight of the actual impact down the road on real people's lives. And so I'm glad you brought that up because guess what? It's not bank CEOs that are going to be bearing the cost of the next financial crisis.
Nope.
The head of Lehman Brothers, I think, is worth the former head of Lehman Brothers is worth north of $100 million and has a job on Wall Street today. Meanwhile, people across the country still carry significant economic scars from the financial crisis. Elizabeth Warren said yesterday that people still come up to her and will whisper to her at events that, I was one of the people that lost their homes during the financial crisis. That sticks with you. They will carry that with them for the rest of their lives. And so before we make changes like this that could increase the chances of another financial crisis, a fact confirmed this week by the Congressional Budget Office, we need to remember who's going to bear the brunt when this goes south.
Yeah, I mean, all of these things. And I remember Alan Greenspan had said something about, I think it was about derivatives. And he said, they were just too complicated to be, it was actually credit default swaps. It was too complicated to be regulated. And, I remember at the time going, if it's so complicated that we can't regulate it, should we be allowed to have it? If it's that complicated that only a handful of people get it, and it's probably the people who walked away fat and happy in all this, should it be something that's even allowed to be in the public sphere?
Yeah, and those are the types of questions we should be, asking ourselves. We should be reviewing the framework that Democrats fought hard for after the financial crisis, fought tooth and nail to get enough votes to enact the Dodd-Frank Act. And we should be asking, okay, 7 years after the Dodd-Frank Act was passed, where are some areas that we actually need to strengthen? We need to build on the progress that we made. A lot of progressive priorities over the years, it's been, over time that we've built on the progress we've made. And so this is another area where there are certain places where we can actually fight for stronger protections for the most systemically important banks and non-banks across the country.
Yeah. Now, this is your area of expertise, obviously. And I have a lot of people who, look, I'm not a banker. I don't even use banks. I go to credit unions. But I've had a lot of people say, well, what we need to do is we need to just reenact Glass-Steagall. Is it possible to go back? Because as it was explained to me is, look, you had this clear dividing this dividing line. You had all your gambling kind of banking over there, and you had your boring stuff like car loans and mortgages and that stuff over there. And never the two should they ever meet. Is it possible to go back to a day like that, or are we so far down the road? There's no way of going back.
That's a fantastic question, and that's the exact question that should be being debated on the Senate floor right now. Because as with any issue within the Democratic Party, there are definitely different ways to achieve the same goal. And so it may very well be the case that these institutions are so intertwined and these activities are so hard to draw bright, clear lines that the best way to go about it is just really ramping up the protections we have in place, the capital requirements to limit the debt that these institutions take on rather than, dividing the institutions by their activity. But that's the kind of debate that, we should be having to figure out what the best path forward is.
Because here's the thing, and this is the thing that gets me, Greg, and you highlighted it a minute ago. The Lehman Brothers CEO, he's doing just well. He's doing very well, thank you very much. It's us, every banking crisis. You go back to the 80s and the S&L scandals and the banking collapses one after another, and all of this stuff. It never seems to be the CEOs and the wealthy who end up getting hammered. It ends up being we, the taxpayer. And sure, okay, great. We've got the FDIC insurance. You're not going to lose your savings account. But somebody's paying that, and it's going to be we, the taxpayers, especially we, the taxpayers, at the bottom of the scale.
That's absolutely right. The 10 million homes that were lost, those people didn't get bailed out. The millions of jobs that were lost, those people didn't get bailed out. The people who are not necessarily quote-unquote sophisticated hedge fund investors that sold all of their retirement assets as the economy was tanking because they wanted to make sure that they had at least something left, who never, experienced the regrowth in the stock market following the financial crisis. Those are the people that pay for crises. It's not the bank CEO.
I mean, this is, and the fact that, I just found the list of the 13 Democrats, and I'm like, really? I mean, have we not learned? And this is the thing that divides the Democratic Party. This is the problem where you have these corporate Democrats that, Tim Kaine being one of them. I'm literally lost.
I know it certainly is disappointing, but I should mention in terms of timing that senators should be out today, and they'll be back in next week, and they'll probably continue working on that bill early next week. It's called S2155, and people can certainly, if you see your senator at an event this weekend or want to place a call to their office either tomorrow or next week, I sincerely encourage you to do so, because I think, people pushing for this bill are hoping that, the American public doesn't know this is going on, doesn't pay attention, because this doesn't poll well. People, for all the reasons that we've talked about, people do not want to roll back the rules on the biggest banks in the country, because we all know what'll happen, because we are the ones that bear the cost.
Absolutely. And while we're watching the sideshow or the reality TV show of As the White House Turns, this kind of stuff is happening right under our noses.
Exactly. And, in terms of just a sheer political point beyond the substance that we've talked about, why progressives would, or Democrats in general, would want to give President Trump, who, as I mentioned, said that this was going to be one of his goals to roll back this key piece of Obama's legacy, why would we give him that win amidst all the other chaos that's going on at the White House?
If the resistance needs a target, this is it right now. Just say no to Dodd-Frank rollback. Greg, I appreciate you taking time, sharing some of your thoughts. I'd love to have you back as this continues, because I'm sure this kind of poison will unfortunately continue.
Unfortunately, you're right, and thanks a lot for having me.
Good stuff, Greg. Appreciate the time. Again, the senators that we've got, you've got Bennett, you've got Carper, you've got Coons of Delaware, you've got Donnelly from Indiana, Hassan, Heitkamp, Jones. Hey, Doug Jones, you knew you weren't getting the most liberal. Kaine, King, Manchin.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2007. That was the day 7,000 workers at Northrop Grumman, a shipyard company in Pascagoula, Mississippi, went out on strike. Grumman is one of the largest defense contractors in the world. The workers were members of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 733, and the Pascagoula Metal Trades Council. They were still reeling from the ravages of Hurricane Katrina just 2 years earlier. The hurricane had devastated the Mississippi Gulf Coast and sent prices for housing skyrocketing. But while workers suffered, Katrina brought $3 billion in federal contracts to Northrop Grumman to repair hurricane damage. Despite this, Grumman proposed a 4-year contract for the workers with no raises and increased health care costs. For many workers, this did not sit well. They knew the company had received massive government contracts, but still was not willing to treat workers fairly at the bargaining table. The union members rejected the offer and voted to strike. The company came back with a proposal offering small raises, which did not keep pace with the cost of living. The strike was called. For 4 weeks, workers marched and manned the picket lines. During the strike, the company cut off the workers' health care coverage. The company then offered slightly higher wages and reduced the increases to health care coverage. Although the proposal was not enough to keep up with the soaring local cost of living, union members voted to end the strike and accept the offer. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
not enough.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. I forgot the name of the Financial Services Modernization Act of 1999. To me, it was always Graham Leach Bliley. Tippy Turtle Phil Graham was the leader of that, and Bill Clinton signed it. And to me, it opened up the floodgates that became the collapse in 2008. And look, it was highly predictable. Virtually everyone I was talking to in the 5 years running up to 2008 was saying, look, we're creating these instruments that are growing so large, so uncontrollable, that eventually it's going to go pop. And I was telling people, look, I'm expecting, February, March. I was expecting, major collapse when the next president comes in, because I thought at least the Bush administration and the wealth class and the billionaires and all the CEOs would have kept the economy propped up just long enough to get Bush out of office. It was even worse than most people were telling me. And we forget this. We forget that era of collapse. We forget that era of losing 1 million jobs a month. I know it's easy to get historical amnesia, but the fact that we're still at this moment talking about unregulating the banks and unleashing them again on us in a predatory fashion is mind-blowingly incompetent. And I know, look, you've got the rural governors who are, the rural senators are like West Virginia and North Dakota are saying, hey, we're gonna try and do it, for credit unions and for small community banks. We're gonna help them. And look, there can be some talk about how we help the community banks and how we help credit unions, of which I am a huge fan. Never do I use a bank. Always a credit union. Because they didn't get into a lot of trouble during the collapse because, you know what? They actually adhere to some of the old principles. I had a guy a couple of years ago on the show who was an old banker. And, he retired 20 years earlier. And he said he knew the minute the banking industry was going south. It was when the mortgages became financial tools, when it was no longer about your ability to pay for the mortgage. Because, those of us who bought houses before a lot of the changes happened, you went through rigorous processes of income verification and how much do you have in your savings and, how much are your other bills. And there's a whole bunch of really just, you could argue intrusive stuff, but the bank wanted to know, can you pay for it? Can you afford it? And he said right around the late 90s or mid to late 90s, people started thinking about, hey, mortgages are front end loaded. You pay most of the interest up front. You get your money back kind of early. You sell them off to brokers. Those brokers can do whatever they want. And then when the people fail, you claw back the property, you sell it again. It starts all over again. Who could lose? And as the housing market was exploding and just housing prices were going through the roof, they were just living large. And he said, it was that moment where it was no longer about your ability to pay and your ability to follow through. And it became more about, hey, when we claw it back, how much more can we sell it for? That's when everything went awry. And I blame a lot of this deregulation fetish, if you will. From the Reagan years forward, it's been tax cuts and deregulation. And it never ends, and it never will end. Because we can never be, in their minds, in the right-wing mind, in the corporate mind, we can never be deregulated enough, and we can never give enough tax cuts to rich people. Now, you, me, us, we the working people, we don't ever really see any substantial tax breaks. We don't. I mean, the $1.50 a week, I don't know about you. $1.50 a week's not going to change my life. If you're in that world where $1.50 is going to change your standard of living, you've got problems. And we need to figure out how to get you above and beyond that. But $1.50 a week is it's not earth shattering. And you look at the fact that some of these corporations out there are just lining their pockets massively. And, someone emailed me yesterday about Amazon because I've been, just nuts about this whole HQ2 thing and this whole nonsensical sweepstakes of how much you're willing to give Amazon for them to come to your community and, don't pay taxes. And as this guy pointed out, in 2017, Amazon had about $5.6 billion in profits and did not pay one single red cent in taxes. Nothing in federal income tax. Zip, zilch, nothing. And they say, behind every great billionaire is a great crime. Richest man in the world, great crime. Didn't pay taxes. He is the master at avoiding taxes. So 2017 didn't pay anything. And then you look at what we did at the end of 2017, and that is give him about $800 million more in a massive tax windfall. And you go, when will we learn? And the reality is I don't know that we ever will. It's mind-blowing. And anyway, as this person pointed out to me, over a 5-year period, over the last 5 years, I guess, Amazon, had, I guess, over $8 billion in profits and ended up paying, I guess, an effective rate somewhere around 11%. And still, we gave them a huge windfall. Now, understand, we dropped the tax rate all the way down, 20% now? And you go, they're still below that. So what's the next tax cut going to be? Well, they're not paying taxes. Let's take it down to 11%. I mean, sometimes this stuff just is maddening. And we keep allowing it to happen. We keep allowing ourselves to get taken by this. We keep allowing ourselves to buy into, tax cuts creates jobs. Really? When did that ever happen? Oh yeah, never. In fact, if you go back to the last time we did this whole repatriation thing, like we did here recently, they did exactly what they did now. They bought back a bunch of shares, a lot of stock buybacks, a lot of CEO bonuses, investors thrilled to death, tickled pink, and a bunch of layoffs. I guess at this point right now we've lost about 55,000 jobs is what they're saying is the number attributed to these tax breaks. You go back to the Bush years, we lost 150,000 jobs. But we did make the CEOs really happy. So I just want to point that out. CEOs thrilled. Now, what we've also done because of the tax bill, and thank you very much, is we've hindered our ability to invest in the future. And I've been saying for a long time, we should not have passed that bill. We should have used that money to invest in roads and bridges. Look, if you're a business and you want to leech off the taxpayer, you're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. Work for it. And right now, and good on the Democrats for finally getting their heads out of the sand, they are proposing a little over $1 trillion infrastructure plan, which again, used to be a no-brainer. We used to all want paved roads and bridges that weren't going to collapse. And you know what? Oddly enough, no one has taken me up on my app idea. I still think my app of once you're going near a structurally deficient bridge, somebody's got to develop this. Every time you go near a structurally deficient bridge or a piece of infrastructure that's rated poorly, it sends you a text. Hey, call mom, or hey, call your wife and kids, or call your husband, or call somebody. Call here to say fix it. I don't know, something. But the Democrats have finally figured it out. We're going to roll out a $1 trillion tax plan, infrastructure plan, even though it's not going anywhere. And they figured out the best way to pay for it, because you got the Trump scheme. He keeps saying we're going to have $1 trillion infrastructure plan. Nah, not so much. That's more of magic pixie dust, and wish in one hand and do something else in the other. This is actually $1 trillion in spending. And they're saying, about $140 billion for roads and bridges, $115 billion for water and sewer, $50 billion to rebuild our crumbling schools, especially in places like Detroit, where I know a teacher who told me when it snows out, got to get the shovel out to shovel out the snow in the classroom. That is not a learning environment. Sorry, just saying. But an actual plan to fund our infrastructure. And it's simple. Roll back most of the Reagan the Reagan Bush, roll back most of the Trump tax cuts. Put that top marginal rate back to 39.6%. Raise the corporate income tax from 21% up to 25%. Still got a 10% cut out of it. They should be thrilled. and saying, look, we need to invest. We need to invest in the future of this country. We need to do all these things. And for me, it's wildly popular because I haven't found anybody who's thrilled with the idea that we gave a boatload of money away to the very wealthy. I don't know anyone who's thrilled that we've given millions of dollars to the Koch brothers. Sorry, I don't know them. If you're there, I would love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Now, some of the temporary middle-class tax cuts, we should make those permanent. I mean, there's a lot of things we should be doing. You want to stimulate the economy? You want to create jobs? If you truly believe that tax cuts creates jobs, I might be able to agree with you. If those tax cuts went to people who work for a living, those people who are making somewhere around $30,000 to $75,000 a year, because I've often said, from $50,000, $60,000 a year down, you shouldn't pay anything. Those are living expenses. Those are you just trying to make ends meet and put food on the table and clothes on the kids and a roof over the heads. Where we should be taxing is well over that, like we used to. See, again, this isn't a rocket science idea. This isn't, fanciful thinking. We've done this and we did it well. If you go back to the Eisenhower years, the good socialist president, they had a top marginal rate of 92%. Nobody ever believes me, and you can look it up, 1953, 92%. So if you made $1.6 million in today's dollars, a little economic gimmickry, that dollar over was 92%. And guess what? We still had rich people. Yes, we did. Just not the kind that we have now who live just wildly unimaginable lives. And then it was Kennedy who, said, we're going to cut taxes and we're going to create jobs, and started this nonsensical BS. And he cut it down to 70%. Cut some of the loopholes, and it actually did work. We cut a little bit of the loopholes. People paid a little bit more in taxes. It seemed to work out. Then the conservatives got a hold of it and said, hey, this could be a way to cut all those rich people's taxes and get us campaign cash. So during the Reagan years, they dropped it down to 50 and then eventually all the way down to 28. And you wonder why we have a billionaire class? Created right then and there during the Reagan years. Which is why, again, when George H.W. Bush looked at the books, he's like, holy crud, we're so in the dark on this. We've got to raise taxes. Oops, read my lips. Sorry, I care about the future of the country. Raise taxes, ended up getting his hat handed to him. But he was on the right track. On the right track. And sorry, the very wealthy need to pay more in taxes. They need to pay their fair share. Goes back to the days of the cave. The caveman didn't ask the scrawny little guy to carry the big buckets of water. Guy with the big shoulders, big strong guy, he carried it back. We didn't have the 90-year-old caveman walking back with a big bucket of water because none would get back. Bigger the shoulders, the more we expect. Same thing today. And yet it seems to be completely upside down to where we think that somehow those 47% of people who don't pay federal taxes, they're just leeches and mooches. No, those people would love to pay federal taxes. They would love it because it means they would be making enough money to pay federal taxes. As opposed to Amazon, who made billions of dollars in profit and paid no federal income tax. Do you see a problem there? I do. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back with Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
We don't have to accept hideous sacrifices that harm the poorest among us.
We need governments, our opinion, to put a price on carbon.
Stark contrast on climate between U.S. and Europe at Energy Industry Conference. Bad news for elephants, good news for a U.S. electric grid powered by clean solar and wind. Plus,
as the Arctic experiences one of its warmest winters ever, Europe has experienced one of its coldest.
The Arctic just had its warmest winter on record, and polar scientists are kind of freaking out.
All of that freaking out and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
They do lie to us repeatedly about global warming, and then it's global cooling, and then it's global. Yeah. The ice age is coming, Time Magazine had, then the earth is going to blow up and burn up, and now they just call it global whatever.
No, they don't, Sean Hannity. Stop lying, and please get some new shtick. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as Sean Hannity continues to use the same lies year after year after year, you have actual new news from the Arctic, and it's not very good.
No, it's not. And it is now official. The Arctic just had its warmest winter on record. That's according to the scientists at the U.S. National Snow and Ice Data Center, who say that it is likely caused by global warming. Sea ice hit the lowest winter extent ever recorded. Temperatures in the Arctic are closer to those typically seen in the month of May, and it's kind of freaking out polar scientists. U.S. scientist Mark Serez called the conditions, quote, unprecedented and crazy, crazy stuff.
You're saying the temperatures in the Arctic in March are like the temperature is usually in May?
Yeah.
Wow.
What happens in the Arctic, of course, doesn't stay in the Arctic. The loss of sea ice in the Arctic has been linked to changes in the jet stream, causing extreme weather events. While the Arctic is experiencing its warmest winter ever, Europe is experiencing one of its coldest winters ever. And the northeastern U.S. is seeing back-to-back intense winter storms.
Don't tell Sean Hannity.
Meanwhile, stark contrasts on the global energy transition were on display between the U.S. and Europe at the big Sarah Energy Industry Conference in Houston this week. In a rambling speech, Energy Secretary Rick Perry touted the surge in U.S. fossil fuel exports and called for making fossil fuels cleaner.
I call it the new energy realism we would welcome and help lead, for that matter, a global alliance of countries willing to help make fossil fuels cleaner rather than abandoning them.
Man, when did Rick Perry become such a drama queen?
Oh, he was always that way. Not surprisingly, Perry did not mention climate change, but Europe-based oil companies are going in the opposite direction. Right after Perry spoke, the CEO of Royal Dutch Shell said the world, quote, has to change because climate change will be so disruptive. The CEO of British Petroleum, Bob Dudley, called for efficiently managing what he was calling the global energy transition to meet emissions cuts under the United Nations Paris Climate Agreement. Dudley also called for governments to put a price on carbon emissions that cause dangerous global warming.
We need all sectors of the economy to bring emissions down, and consumers as well. And we need governments, in our opinion, to put a price on carbon. That would enable us to do a whole lot more.
So the CEO of oil company BP is calling for a carbon tax?
Yep, that's right.
Again, don't tell Sean Hannity or Rick Perry.
Meanwhile, some bad news for elephants. The Trump administration's Fish and Wildlife Service has quietly announced that it will now allow the importation of endangered elephant body parts from African nations on a case-by-case basis, a reversal of President Trump's statements earlier this year that he would keep the Obama-era ban on such trophy imports.
Well, you know how those forgotten men and women in the Midwest love their elephant trophy hunting.
But some good news, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has unanimously rejected the Trump administration's attempt to block a lawsuit led by 21 young people who are suing the federal government for failure to act on climate change. The ruling means that the children's case, brought by the nonprofit environmental law group Our Children's Trust, can now go forward in federal court. Finally, a new study of decades of U.S. weather data has calculated that solar and wind energy alone could reliably supply 80% of all U.S. electricity demand. By investing in system-wide upgrades to the electric grid and deployment of battery storage, which, by the way, would also create jobs, the U.S. could have emissions-free clean electricity by mid-century.
Clean energy and jobs.
Yep.
Wrong kind of energy, Wrong kind of jobs, I guess.
For the Trump administration.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
I got news for you, and it's going down. Before you come home and tell me you're not angry, and I'll be leaving, and I'll be leaving.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, he did it. Donald Trump signed the tariffs. A couple of good exemptions, like we said earlier, for Mexico and for Canada. Going to see if there's a way to make sure that we have a leverage point. I got to be honest, not unhappy with something that Trump did today. And that's a first. Understand, a first. Anyway, here to talk about what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C., Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So what do you think? Good, bad? What do you think of today's signing?
Well, if he keeps going the direction he's going to do really good on this issue. Now, I know there's the panic buttons being pushed, and they're on TV, and they're saying about the price of a can of beer, and on and on and on. And the Koch brothers are, all distressed. Of course, that won't matter to Trump. They didn't support him in the primary anyway. I think they were with Jeb, and then Governor of Wisconsin, they were backing him. So, the Capitol Hill Republican, people like Speaker Ryan, they're very angry with this entire thing. But again, I don't think that matters. I think he's onto something. I actually like the idea where he says, okay, Canada and Mexico renegotiate NAFTA, and I'll let you alone on this. It gives a leverage point, and then they see he's serious on the tariffs. Continues, Rick, with frankly, with more tariffs. I really do.
No,
I hope he continues with more.
No, we'll see what happens. And again, I said from the very beginning, I have not been a Trump supporter, and so people can stop with screaming and carrying on. But I said on the trade issue, he's not wrong.
Right.
And it sounds a lot like what Bernie Sanders was talking about. It's a lot what I've been talking about for years. If he were to stick to this, if he would have came out with this at the beginning, instead of all the craziness and all of the musical staff members and all that stuff, I think he'd be much further down the road. If he'd done this in infrastructure, I think he'd have been much more popular.
Yeah, and this one, and the infrastructure's failed. With this one, he's got to continue on this course, too. I mean, look, there is no question that he won states, including, your home state, because people did not believe that Hillary Clinton was genuine with the trade issues. They just didn't believe it. They knew Bernie Sanders was. They had suspicions on Hillary, because of past comments. And Trump stepped in and took the Sanders mode, and now he's got to continue on with it, or he is really going to, let down. Forget the wall. He's going to let down a main important promise, of the campaign. So I liked it. I hope he continues. I hope and pray that this threat works, because it is a type of political threat, and that's okay in my book. And I hope it works with China. I hope China thinks, okay, can't fool around anymore with this. But the people are killing me on the Hill that are saying, well, we're losing jobs, we need another trade bill. Yeah, so we can lose more jobs and then have another trade bill.
Exactly. I mean, I go back to Chorus, and, you had Obama who on the trail in 2008 saying, we're not doing any more of these trade deals anymore because they're job killers. And he was right on the trail. And in fact, I sat 20 feet from him when he said, you can trust me. Now, I'm not going to pass, the Columbia or the Chorus or the Panama. I'm not going to do it. No Columbia, no Panama, no Chorus. And what we get? Columbia, Panama, and Chorus. And what happened? Chorus cost us jobs, like 80,000 last time I read.
They get in there, and they all do it. I mean, Bill Clinton did it with Newt Gingrich, permanent World Trade status. I called it the unholy deal of the two. And they get in there, and then they think they have to be the president of the world. somehow yield to these things. And also, the international corporations exert tons of pressure, but I hope it's a new direction. Now, is there going to be some pain with this? Sure, you know it, and I know it. There will be some pain. There'll be some industries affected, but again, if everybody can just hold firm, it should renegotiate, deals for us. Did you see the announcement on the Korea deal, by the way, that just broke?
No, I didn't.
This is quite amazing. It just literally broke as you and I started talking. President Trump has accepted an invitation by South Korea to meet directly with Kim Jong-un. And it's following talks between South and North, so they announced that just now. And this was announced by South Korea's National Security Advisor. The president of South Korea called President Trump. North Korea also signaled it would not test missiles anymore and would be willing to negotiate ending its nuclear weapons program, according to, again, the National Security Advisor, Chung Eui-yong. Kim Jong-un has stressed his eagerness to meet President Trump as soon as possible. President Trump has appreciated the greeting and said he would meet Kim Jong-un by May to achieve permanent denuclearization. I never thought I'd be reading this.
No, my first thought is, can we put that on pay-per-view? Can we put this meeting on pay-per-view?
Oh, it's going to be a treat. Right.
So now, he's going to be able to say that he has done what no other president in history has done. He's brought North Korea to the table.
Right. I supported Bill Clinton when we paid the money, and I don't quibble with it. Why not try that to his father? I think we paid or we agreed $2 billion something. We've tried everything under the sun. I'm surprised this has come about.
And the thing is, much like a lot of things that I hear coming out of Trump's mouth, do I believe it? And that's the other part of it.
Yeah, this one I think they are going to meet.
I'm sure they'll meet, but will they give up their nuclear program? Will this be the end of all of this insanity? Like I'm sure they're going to meet. That's going to be a clown show in itself. But the other part of this, will they stop being, the stone in the shoe, so to speak?
It's to be seen, but I thought this was quite amazing.
Maybe the approval ratings are going to come back up. Who knows? Let's move on. The Florida House passed some gun legislation. What'd they pass?
The House passed a bill, and it was a mixed bag of the votes, with both parties, some voting yes, some voting no. Takes the age of 21 for the rifle, and then it allows the ability for some of the teachers to arm. Some of the teachers don't like the bill. I do a radio show in Florida down there, Mark Bernier, and I asked him today, because I knew I'd be doing your show tonight, what he thought. He thought that if it gets all the way through, the governor will veto it. That's what he said.
Okay. Interesting. So if you're the Republicans in the state, why would you waste the Capitol and pushing that through if you knew he was going to veto it? Because you're going to tick off the NRA.
Yeah, they did it, and we'll just have to see the outcome.
How that plays out.
He tells me that the governor will veto because of several reasons. I guess the teachers are upset, the NRA is upset. Both sides have a problem with it.
There's common sense ground on this. It's just that no one's going to get to it.
Right.
And again, I think it comes back to a societal thing, to where we almost have to say, I'm sorry, you don't have an unfettered right to have guns everywhere. And, this idea that you can buy 33 guns in a year and then go shoot up a concert in Las Vegas, at some point we've got to be pushing back against that kind of gun nuttery. At least that's part of my thought.
I thought originally, honestly, Rick, that maybe the particular weapon would be banned. I thought that would rise to that level.
No, I think the NRA just has too much clout with the Republican Party. Because I know, I can't tell you how many people I know who it's not the gun, and if you take my gun and from my cold dead hand, they've been, just the brainwashing that's gone on.
Of course, even when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker, they didn't bring up the ban, and I think her answer was the agenda was too full, but I really think that certain members just, really complain about it.
No, it's the rail you don't want to step on, because once you open up that bee's nest, man, there's nothing good there for you.
Right.
At least politically speaking. I mean, as a citizen, I want something done. I want policies that are going to move us forward. But I understand it politically. And finally, there's been some surveying done of 10 states where you've got some pretty close races, and Democrats not doing that great.
Yeah, no, this, I'm not a firm believer, of course, that polls are everything. They're a, basis you can look at. And there's a lot of time left in the election. Now, for example, in this poll, it is saying that Trump is doing better in these states, these particular states, which are problem states for the Democratic side. He's doing better than he is, way better than the national average. And so based on that, they have answered that if the election were held today, 5 of the Democratic members would lose seats. Now, again, there's a lot of variables. There's opponents, who's running. Just to give you an example, one of the seats that they're targeting there is Senator Joe Manchin. Now, I know a lot of progressives do not care for Senator Manchin. I'm fully aware of that, because of some of his voting records. But I live near West Virginia. He's not going to lose, okay? And so in this survey, it looks close, but again, he won't lose his race. It's got Ohio, where Trump's ahead, but Sherrod Brown's in very good, condition. So it's to be seen. But I do think it is a telling note, because for anybody, this election coming up, and I've had friends of mine said, "Hey, Bob, it's all over with. Oh my goodness, there's going to be a complete massive sweep," and on and on and on. Just doesn't always run that way. So I think what the poll is telling people is, you have to do your due diligence if you want to win an election. You have to have a candidate, money, volunteers, and get out the vote.
No, you got to do the hard work. It's not going to snap your fingers and it happens. You're right.
You got it.
No, because I keep people saying, "No, blue tsunami." I'm going,
I know.
I'm guardedly optimistic things are going to turn out okay, because
same people that said that Hillary was in for sure.
Yeah, and I wasn't one of those. I was,
I knew. I could see the tea leaves.
I'm still leery of this turning out. I'm hopeful. As I said, I'm hopeful, guardedly optimistic, a lot of that stuff. But the idea of an absolute sweep, I don't know. Not there. Bob, I appreciate the time. Good talking with you.
Thank you, Rick. You too.
Good stuff. Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come on.
For and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1924. That was the day that tragedy struck at the Utah Fuel Company mine in Castle Gate, Utah. The mine stood about 90 miles southeast of Salt Lake City. Coal mining began at Castle Gate in 1888. On the fateful day of the explosion, at 8 in the morning, 2 violent blasts ripped through the number 2 mine. 20 minutes later, a third explosion went off. According to an investigation by the Bureau of Mines, the explosions inside the mine were extremely violent and reached all parts of the mine. 171 miners were killed instantly. Those who died reflected the diversity of those who worked in the mines. There were 49 Greeks, 22 Italians, 8 Japanese, 7 English, 6 Australian, 2 Scotch, 1 Belgian, and 76 Americans, including 2 African Americans. They left behind a combined total of 241 children and 25 pregnant wives. Rescue efforts were impeded by the poisonous gases and fire raging in the mine. Rescuers donned helmets to attempt to reach those below. One rescue leader, George Wilson, died from the carbon monoxide when his nosepiece separated from his helmet. It's believed the explosion occurred when one of the bosses attempted to relight the flame on his headlamp. At the time, he was investigating a pocket of built-up gas in the mine. The flame ignited the gas and built up coal dust. The previous shift had kicked up the dust, and it had not been adequately watered down. This contributed to the explosions. It took 9 days to recover all of the bodies of those who died. The families of those killed were provided about $64 a month by the company and the state of Utah for several years after the tragedy. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. You fascists are bound to lose.
Lots of fun with this administration. You had Ben Carson with his $31,000 dinette set. To be fair, did come with 4 chairs and a really very pretty hutch. So, okay, maybe, hey, 31 grand for a dinette set. Really? Wow, it must be nice to use other people's money to buy your stuff. And now we find out that Ryan Zinke, the Interior Secretary, evidently he spent more than $139,000 for a door. Yeah, I kind of remember, you go back to the 80s and 90s, and there were all those people who were saying, $500 for a hammer, $300 for a toilet seat. I'm thinking $139 grand for a door, a bit excessive. But in his defense, it does say secretary's door. So, in that, you got to go, okay, it's only 139 grand. Why not? And you go through all of these people in this administration. Remember, these were the people who are telling us that they're fiscally responsible. These are the people who claim to, when they grab an eagle, they grab a quarter, the eagle screams. And yet, wow, they spend like drunken sailors on leave. In fact, Zinke, he's not unknown for being a big spender. In fact, I guess he took 3 helicopter rides last year. 53 grand. $53,000, 3 trips. But hey, he had to go horseback riding with Vice President Pence. So, that's got to be worth something, right? My favorite one was took the trip to Las Vegas to talk to hockey executives. And you go, what exactly is the Interior Minister doing, or the Interior Secretary doing going to Las Vegas to talk to hockey executives? Are they trying to save ice or something? I don't know. It's bizarre. And then you look at, Scott Pruitt, the guy who's got his own skiff, the guy who's got a 24/7 security detail. It just seems to never end. And this is what we know. Now, again, as the thing that keeps popping up with me, all of this stuff that we know, all of this, and it seems overwhelming. It seems like we're getting hit in the head every day by a fire hose full of just nonsense and insanity. Imagine what we don't know. Imagine just how crazy it is in the things that we don't know. I mean, these guys don't seem to want to fly coach. They want their private jets because, hey, as Scott Pruitt said, there are people there. I don't want to be near those people. I mean, it's nuts. Just nuts. I'll tell you, amazing times we live in, I guess. They say, may you live in interesting times. These are much more bizarre than interesting times. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. If you missed any portion of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And don't forget, on Saturday night, 7 p.m., Free Speech TV. Check out the Rick Smith Show TV show. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email